going now, and then okay. So Ellen, please, were you gonna start, Ellen, or was Rick gonna start? How?
Yeah, I mean, Rick kindly suggested to provide a presentation, so let's leave the floor to Rick, and we will pick it up from there, if that's
Okay.
okay with you, Rick.
Yep, that works fine for me. So I put a presentation together. It's kind of a stream of consciousness. I got to tell you, Cello, that these recordings are great because I watched the recording and just a whole bunch of things jumped into mind. So I just wanted to give a bit of a risk management context for liquid waste services in Metro Vancouver. One thing I got to do first is we always have a thing where we do something for just telling us about what's going on in our lives. This is my weekend. I was up at the Sunshine Coast, so you think it's beautiful in Vancouver. It's even more beautiful on the Sunshine Coast. That's my walking partner down
Is
at
that an
our base.
Italian? Is that an Italian? What is it called?
No, it's a golden doodle.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, she's a miniature, so she's a bit ball focused, ball crazy. Anyways, so that's it. That's my little personal moment. And on we go. I got 4 questions. Like I said, this is a bit of a stream of consciousness that I put in here, and I think there's 4 questions that came out of it. It's a bit mixed up, but hopefully it kind of leads to something. And I wanted to talk about, a risk register. We've got a continuous improvement concept that we're developing in our work of strategic planning. So I just wanted to have a chat about that. I'll go through some stuff first. I'll talk about top down and bottom up risk registers. I just had this question about how WSSC recognized the need for a corporate risk management because we're kind of having trouble getting there. And then just if there's any thoughts on how to integrate WASA experience learnings into a risk register concept. So those questions will pop up as we go through. Bit of context, I think you all know about it. This is from an older presentation, Metro Vancouver. We're in Canada, we're in British Columbia. We're 2.7 million, comprises about 53% of the population of BC. Land area of the region is 29,000 hectares, 1,120 square miles. Here's our services. Our services are scattered all around the region. We've got drinking water, regional liquid waste, regional solid waste, air quality, housing, and regional parks. That's kind of the public-facing portion of our services. We've got a lot of federation services. And this is the Metro Vancouver wastewater system. So of that 2.7 million, we're servicing about 2.65 million. And our serviced area is about 6,200 acres. So just a small portion of the total regional area. And those areas that are in color, that's the areas that we cover. And the red dots, the larger red dots, are our 5 regional treatment plants. So we service municipalities. We don't service the households. So we're a wholesaler. And so we have 23 member jurisdictions. Those member jurisdictions, the councillors from each of those jurisdictions, mayors and or councillors, are members of our board. And depending on the population of each member municipality or member jurisdiction, they get so many board members to vote. So we have 4 legal entities down below, GVS and DD, that's the drainage and greater sewerage and drainage district. So that has a couple of functions in it. I'll show you in a sec. GVWD, MVRD, that's kind of the federation, how all of the municipalities talk as a federation, and MVHC, the housing corporation. So just to show you, so in the GVS and DD, we have the sewer and drainage systems and solid waste. Water systems is pretty obvious, the housing corporation. And MVRD has these regional services. We talk about affordable housing, air quality, the 911 service, things like that. If you want it, you can find it online. I won't go through it too much. So this is and here is the staff. So this is our commissioner, and the commissioners, right now it's up to 11 direct reports and all the various departments within Metro Vancouver. On the right-hand side is kind of the service departments, human resources, external relations, finance, legal services, board and information. On the left-hand side is kind of the deliverers of services. We got a project delivery group, which I think should be on the right-hand side, but others think otherwise. liquid waste services, regional planning, parks and environment, those kind of things. So that's sort of where the staff come into the whole thing. And then to get to where we are, so we're liquid waste services, work for our general manager is Peter Navratil, and we have a group of 5, currently 5, about to be 6 fairly soon, sort of major groups or divisions, and directors in each of those. So that's a bit of background about how we're set up. Other notable things is, so you can see on this slide, this is where liquid waste services sits, water services sits in the same place. Those 2 utilities make up about at least 80% of the total budget for Metro Vancouver. And so this is another kind of it's valuable to understand. So we have this project delivery group that's going to have that has just started. They've got a project management office and an asset management office. So when we're talking about risk management, there's some obvious links to those 2 activities, and something that may be coming up there. The other thing that we have in our financial services is we've got a purchasing and risk management group, and we have a risk management officer. So Colleen, this is what I mentioned the other day, that our risk management officer is basically taking care of our insurance and not truly risk management in my view of the whole thing.
Mm.
So that's about it for our setup. So we do have a board strategic plan. Most of the information that you just saw came out of the board strategic plan. So we've got it for the current board, whose tenure is from 2019 to 2022. From the board strategic plan, we get strategic plan directions. So there's a page of actions that each of the functions will do. So that first one is regional services, or what we're going to do. The next one, water services, liquid waste, solid, regional parks, regional planning, air quality. So when we've been talking about sort of our drivers or our risks from a corporate perspective, we've been thinking, okay, well, these are really, if we can reverse engineer these somehow, these are the risks that the board is talking about. Now, the board put these together. They were assisted by staff in a facilitated way, and it was done in a weekend at a workshop. It's stealing a little bit from the board's previous board's strategic direction. It's not that different, and it's not very much different from what we have for our long-range plans in the utilities. So for managing liquid waste, assess the value of advanced levels of treatment. So these are all actions. So we're trying to think of, okay, how can we reverse engineer this and understand what the actual risk would be coming out of all this? I'll tell you why we're trying to do this in a sec. And this is my kind of bottom down and top up process in the absence of a corporate risk management function or lead role. So you can see them, they're kind of vague, and you can't get a direct idea of what the risk is in some of them. Incorporate innovation. So these are shortened versions of the longer version, but that's basically what it says. And so trying to understand what risk that's trying to deal with is kind of tough. Right size the system to keep pace with growth, then building resilience, long-term strategy for seismic upgrades. That's fairly obvious, that's fairly simple. We're in a seismically active zone and fairly high risk, and we're not very strong in that way right now. Ensure facilities can withstand climate change, so that's another one that's fairly obvious. Financial sustainability, I won't get into these too much, but looking at like a few actions for financial sustainability, and foster collaboration and engagement. And this is another one of the tough ones. Some of them are fairly easy for eliminating combined overflows, I&I reduction. They expand public awareness. The risk is kind of tough to understand. So the other tool that from this is from the previous board strategic plan, which is fairly similar to this. They did a strengths, a SWOT analysis, basically. So strengths, areas for improvement, opportunities, threats. So this is another tool that we see that we could use to kind of understand those threats. By the way, as I'm roaring through this, anybody feel comfortable just to yell at me and say, hey, I got a question or a comment or whatever. So liquid waste services, we began as went through a reorganization and came out as liquid waste services function. back in 2014. And since then, we've been doing strategic planning. So this is kind of what we said we'd like to get into, what we'd like to do when we first started our strategic planning. So we'd have, each year, those gray boxes represent a workshop of some form where we just spend time coming up with sort of strategic focus of strategic areas. And we ultimately, that plan, do, check, act circle that you see off on the right, we wanted to get to a point where it was more of an improvement cycle than recreating the summer. And I'll explain that in just a second. So that was our goal for the whole thing. So one of the things we talked about at the time was, what is strategic planning for us? So on the left, in things that we do things with infrastructure. So we plan stuff, we design stuff, we build stuff, we operate stuff, and we maintain stuff. And then on the right-hand side, you see sort of our business needs. So we need talent, knowledge, skills, ability, capacity, tools, and processes, which really, we need those in order to be good at doing the things on the left, on all the stuff. So the other thing we recognize is we've got a liquid waste management plan that we spend a fair bit of, and this is a legal document that we have to do as required by our regulator, that lays out what we're going to be doing with our stuff and what kind of the infrastructure plans are. It's not in detail of the infrastructure, but it's got that overall plan for it and sense of what we're supposed to be doing. And we spend a lot of time working on that. There's a very detailed effort. It involves with our member municipalities, and we go to the public with it. So we kind of said a while ago that we said, we're not going to focus on this for our strategic planning. We're going to focus on the stuff on the right for strategic planning, because we got another process for the stuff on the left. We've got another process that does a lot of thinking about what we need to do there. So let's focus on these parts and the business needs, the talent, the tools, the processes, what we need to fix in order to, or get better at in order to do the stuff on the left as efficiently as possible. So we're a fairly impatient bunch in liquid waste services. So we've been doing our strategic planning cycle is pretty consistent. We have a 1 to 2 day workshop to do our strategic plan. We've been doing it for those cycles. We kind of did it for once a year. And the last cycle, we did one plan that lasted a couple of years. So they've been a 1 to 2 day workshop, and they all have the same kind of pattern. I'll just go through it real quick. Identify the participants the first time. So leadership team, program leads plus field leads. So what we originally did is, this is our org chart, obviously. So the very first year we said, well, we're a brand new organization. We got to work as a team. So let's just do the leadership team only. That's going to be our strategic planning group. They have to learn how to understand and get along with each other. And honestly, there's so many things that we had to fix that if this group didn't know what they were to fill our work plan enough, then they should have been fired. And it was pretty easy. We had a lot of things that we needed to do. And then in subsequent cycles, we added the program leads. So these are all the various programs underneath that leadership team. And we had a lead for each of those programs that participated in it. So we're slowly growing that whole who's being involved in these sessions. And then we're going to have field leads. So the wastewater treatment plant managers, the collection systems managers, supervisors, and superintendents of those. So that was that first step. Second step was, we'd in the workshop itself, we'd get our heads in the game. We'd recap previous activities. We'd do some team building. We'd review our overall goals. Our third thing is we'd do a SWOT analysis. Initially, we did it from raw. We didn't have anything. We had some blank sheets, and we went through and did strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then in subsequent sessions, we updated the previous SWOT lists. So we take them, and I've got an example in the next page of just changing things and say that's still a weakness, or that's gone from a weakness to a strength. We've got that nailed. Here's an opportunity. And then what we're trying to do is move towards a continuous improvement process, which is kind of where my first question comes up, because I think it is. So this is just an example of the SWOT output. And you can see the stuff that's in green is stuff that's been confirmed. The check marks are things that, we repeated that again. You can see some things that are crossed out or added in, strengths, weaknesses, same things for opportunities and threats. So we're seeing this as another place where we can mine information to get our risk register pulled together. So then after that, we'd identify areas of improvement. So we get this whole crowd to do a brainstorm, keep the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats close to mind. This is why we spent a fair bit of time thinking about it, so it can be in everybody's head, so that they're already thinking throughout the year of things that we need to do. And so we just find those, put them down on a piece of paper, do some synthesizing of those to group them to make sure that we're not overlapping, and then select areas to focus on through a vote of the whole crowd. So trying to get to 3 key areas that we want to focus on in each cycle. And then go through some work of identifying the initial actions. So we identify a team that's going to be responsible for each of the key areas or actions, and then identify initial things to get them going. It might be just as simple as a meeting or review what the background issues are. So through the 4 years that we've done in the past, these are kind of the strategic priorities. We had a real problem with keeping it down to 3 in each year, and that was a problem. And we found that a lot of them overlapped with the work of programs that already existed. So people were responsible for doing some work. So we said, okay, we'll leave it with them. We'll make sure they've got the right tools, but recognize that that's going on. And then we got a new general manager in 2017 who kind of agreed with the idea of keeping it to 3. So we identified in the last strategic planning cycle, we identified 3 items: the resilient workforce, IT resources, and roles and accountability. And that included some culture things. That was our focus for 2018, 2019. So this is very interesting because you can see that there's a couple of things that line up with the UAIM focus on the people part in the in this last cycle. So that comes to my first question. Now we had this thing about move towards a continuous improvement process in our strategic planning process, and I think I don't really need an answer. Maybe it's a bit of an affirmation. Maybe I'm feeling a bit insecure, but does a risk register meet our continuous improvement concept in that area? I think it does. I think it makes sense. And yeah, and if there's any thoughts or anything else, I'll take a little pause and let others have a bit of a chance to talk in.
Rick, it's very interesting presentation. Really informative. So the role of the risk register is for you to track the things that are sort of threats in a way, and kind of keep track of those. Is that kind of what it boils down to?
Yeah, it's kind of what I said, what I mentioned before about we have these SWOT lists, and we're using those, and to try and get it so that we have these now ranked, and we're tackling the first ones first. We're not redoing those SWOT lists. We'll be changing that risk register based on the, what treatment we put on each risk. If we've done it, if we dealt with the risk, what the treatment has been, has it been satisfied, or have we got more to do? Those kind of things.
So if I understand correctly, this is understood to be sort of responsibility of everybody, basically. To risks are kind of guiding the behavior of many people. I mean, I mean, addressing risks includes, it seems like, a broad base of people then, right?
Yeah, we're still fairly impatient, and my boss, the general manager, has said, well, you know what, for our workshops, because we've talked about some of the work that other utilities have done, very involved, a lot of activity, a lot of meetings. He says, I want to spend a day and a half, a day maybe tops, on doing this on an annual basis, going through it. So might be a tough gig to do, but without having a corporate risk management process or function in place, we always get asked about, why are you guys doing this by other sections of the organization, and we think it's really important, and it's really helped us. Even our culture has been kind of improved by being able to do this.
So Rick, I had a couple of questions, and I noticed Elaine is dropped off for some reason, so she'll probably be rejoining us. But Do you identify, realizing this is an overall liquid waste, kind of list of risks for the risk register, do you assign, consistent with the methodology we've talked about before, do you assign risk owners? Do you identify what the mitigations are or the treatments are for the risks that are identified using a methodology for that? And then do you have a way to monitor performance against that?
Yeah, well, we don't have a risk register right now, so we're working on preparing the risk register. Again, my boss doesn't want us spending a lot of people's effort, creating the risk register, but so we're going to be mining whatever resources. But yeah, we have a way of, when we've identified those actions that we want to take on in a certain cycle, then we are very clear on following up with identifying who's responsible for it and letting them and then following up and seeing what the progress has been. Yeah.
So that when you get to the next year, then you're going to be able to go back and on your continual improvement thing and say, what did we accomplish and do we still need to do? And are there any new risks that we need to deal with, et cetera?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And that's what our thing is. So yeah. Okay. Any other questions on this so far?
No, that's very interesting. Very interesting.
So this is sort of my stream of consciousness that came out after listening to a couple of meetings ago. I saw the video and my brain was just firing on a bunch of stuff that Helen was talking about. And so this is what my kind of, and I just put this down really quick while I was thinking, and this is kind of my vision of the risk register. And I was just trying to see, so I'm a big believer of the 5 whys. So everybody's heard about the 5 whys in thinking about root cause of an issue. Like any one issue, you have to ask, okay, well, the pump didn't turn on. Well, why? Because the breaker was out. Oh, okay, why? Because the maintenance didn't happen. Okay, why? Well, we don't have a good maintenance planning system. Okay, well, let's get into something that we can deal with. So in risk, I think it's a 5 whys again. You can see from those examples that I gave of the board risk, they talk about communications. And we can't really identify what that's an action, but that could cover a whole pile of different risks. So it's a bit tough. But I can also see that, you can have a bunch of different levels of contributing risk to any one risk item. So we might have a board risk item that says, we're not communicating enough. And then okay, well, that's kind of, how did you get that? How did you get that sense of what's going on? So there's got to be some contributing risk to that. And it might be that, people don't understand what we're doing. Okay, well, that doesn't really make sense. So there's got to be another contributing risk to that. And so you'll work yourself down to these contributing risks almost, and then you get to these various actions, and you can have actions. I guess you can have actions at multiple levels. Like you can trigger off. It might be that you have to wait to that 4th level of risk that I'm talking about, where you say, oh, there's an action there that I can see. Here's something that we can do. Or there might be an action at a much higher level as well. And I think one of the, and I'm trying to get a sense if anybody's seen a risk register that handles this. And we're also talking about building it from the bottom up. So we're going to start to mine our corporate risks. And some of those have a bunch of other risks that we're guessing that contributed to those. And then we'll mine from the bottom up. So, and I've put these lines in here to say, there's risks at a project level or a facility level or a division level or a department level or a board level. And then, and really the big wins are going to be, I had this idea, this concept of a triple word score. Any Scrabble players in the crowd?
Yeah.
And you kind of recognize that, you got an action that pops up all over the place, and your triple word score is if you kind of nail one action, and that gives a whole bunch that deals with a whole bunch of different risk items throughout the whole process.
No, Rick, this is Scott, and Elaine, chime in here, but the idea of a risk matrix, which is maybe similar in a way to what you were just describing, would get at a way to say, rather than deal with every mitigation you could possibly think of, rather than deal with every risk you can possibly think of, it's a way to prioritize, what your highest level risks are that are associated with each of your major, kind of strategic areas. And so the use of that risk matrix might, if maybe you're going to go on to explain how you're going to do that, but that would be a way to, differentiate and to help organize as well.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, Rick, but I had an internet issue, so I dropped off for a few minutes. But basically, I really think you're on the very good path, and what you said is exactly correct. And what Scott also said, if you want to prioritize the risk matrix at whatever level in the organization you are doing risk, is going to prioritize, because obviously you are, by determining a probability of occurrence and the severity of this risk and multiplying the probability by the severity, you are going to have a risk score. And this risk score is going to be positioned in your risk matrix. And you are going to focus and tackle the red zone risk first. And the red zone risk, when either you're going from a bottom-up approach or a top-down approach, basically your risks are going naturally to consolidate because they are going to be around the same theme. In general, even huge corporations, they have like 10, max 15 top risk in the company, but all those top risks have some different component to it. Example, the risk around succession, expertise, capabilities in human resources for the water and wastewater industry. Okay, that could be a risk going forward. That could be challenging, right? So you might have this kind of umbrella risk at an overall company level, which would be a strategic risk, but you might have your plant director who say, well, yeah, I have 3 guys who are retiring next month and I can't find any good candidates, or I will have to downgrade my role profile because I can't find people of that expertise. You might have another colleague, maybe in communication, who is going to say, yeah, I'm looking for somebody expert in institutional communication, but I can't find anybody who has knowledge of blah, 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 blah. And you might find those different pockets in your company related to the same theme. So, and again, I'm sorry because the call dropped for a few minutes, so I lost that piece. But if your question is, how do you have an enterprise risk register? Your enterprise risk register is really the consolidation of all the similar risks that are in different risk registers across your organization, but around the same theme. Does it make sense?
One thing, Elaine, you dropped off, but I thought a very cool thing that Rick said that they're doing in order to mine information was use the 5 whys, as a way to dive into if you have a particular threat or a particular risk, why is that? And that was a very, very good method to help flesh it out. That was really good, Rick.
No, absolutely, Rick. That, the 5 whys is really, it's what I call at WSSC Water, to make my colleagues laugh, my devil's advocate game. So yeah, this is a why, and always why. Yeah.
So I guess another part of my question is, when you have these risk registers, kind of all over the place, and I can see a risk register for, like I say, a project will have one, a facility will have one, division will have one. Are they all coming, they're all pulling together in one place, or do you have these separate and remote risk registers all over the place?
Okay, so when we started the program, we had Excel spreadsheets. And in the 21st century in the United States, we thought it was not really very ideal, because a lot of manual process, a lot of cross-examining registers. So what we did with my IT colleagues, we created a web-based risk register. I can share with you live, if you will, what it looks like. It's in web focus, so it's very simple tool where basically we enter the description of the risk, the cause of the risk, the consequence of the risk owner, and the mitigation plan, right? And the treatment plan, we call it, right? And the progress on that treatment plan, and the risk owner, and if the risk is closed or open, and of course, the probability and the severity. So it means that when you have, we created also in parallel, because now we have the data with the web-based risk register, which is a central repository, meaning that all the risk register at WSSC Water are in that tool. So when we have the data, so obviously, because we have the data, we have created a dashboard with key risk indicators, and basically it gives you, select if you want to see all the red zone risk, or if you want to see only the green zone risk, or if you want to see the risks that are open, that have been open for so many days, etc., etc. If you're interested in on another maybe focused session, I could show you what it looks like. But to answer your question, we have one single repository, which is the web-based risk register, and the reporting tool, which is the risk dashboard.
Okay, yeah, that'd be brilliant if there could be an opportunity for doing that.
Yeah, Rick, you may want to, I don't know how much more presentation you have. You may want to, kind of zip through the rest of it. But one of the underlying issues, it seems that you have, one, you said that you have a risk manager, but it's really an insurance-based one. So you have a governance, well, there you go. You have a kind of a question from a governance standpoint.
Yeah.
Of how are you going to deal with this, and who do you assign from each one of your business areas and that kind of thing, or what does that look like for your organization? So it looks like that's
WSSC Water. Okay.
Yeah.
So here I have a caveat. Okay. Risk management, when you take the standards like the COSO standards, and when you take the ISO 31000 standard, the enterprise risk management function is by definition transparent and independent. Okay, we have a governance role where basically our role is to bring at the table all the risk and to bring them for discussion, right? We have no agenda either or. So same thing as compliance, same thing as safety, for example, which are really cross-functional or quality cross-functional activities. So because obviously there's very few utilities that do that, they had put this function there, but typically speaking, it's not there. It's really reporting to one of the board members, or typically reporting directly to the board. The chief risk officer, typically speaking, reports to the board in a company. So in this case, would report directly to Carla. Worst case scenario, which is not ideal, would report to one of the DGMs, deputy general managers, which is not ideal because, of course, there's a bias due to the lane. Okay. Yep. So if, and I understand it's not easy, above all from a starting point. Okay. But again, it's very, very important. A risk manager is transparent and independent. For example, when I produce my quarterly report, I do not well, I give it FYI to my boss, but I'm sending it directly to the GM and to the DGMs. Okay.
Right.
Meaning there's no check on what I've written or whatever, because that's how it should be, right? However, having, and yes, I'm with you, Rick, in most of the public entities today, risk is either or in finance, and yes, you're correct, they deal with insurance or claims sometimes, is either with asset management, and asset management is doing risk management. If you want to consider it at an enterprise level, it should be, if you can't have it, and I understand you may not be able to have it right away, if it cannot report to the CEO, or if it cannot report to the layer below the CEO, in our case, the DGMs, you may want to have it in a division reporting to the equivalent of a deputy general managers that is leading with business improvement and or with transformation, because this is where those could, I would say, get the independence and make more sense in terms of what we are trying to achieve at the end of the day. I see Scott smiling.
Yeah, you may also want to consider how does it relate to your performance management, just the way that you're organized, and that's another aspect. And some organizations kind of combine those together.
Yes.
You know, and so that's just something else to consider.
One thing I was curious about was, like, how did WSSC recognize the need for corporate risk management?
Okay. The story, so to first answer to Scott, actually for us, business improvement is strategic performance, Scott. So yes, I'm with you. Why? Because at the very beginning, this position was supply chain management. And because procurement, supply chain is really at the heart of basically all what's happening in the company. And because there's a new division, like as you see, strategy and innovation office, where performance, business improvement is, they said, okay, obviously risk management is not only supply chain, is really beyond that. So that's how they created the position.
Okay, but it wasn't like a crisis or anything that came up. It was just there was a belief from the general manager's perspective that this was needed.
Yeah, actually, there was okay. I'm going to. I could say yes. The answer to that is not yes. So I'm not going to say yes. There was a strong belief from the predecessor of Todd Allen, who was Jackie Vincent. Because Jackie and I, we used to talk quite a lot. Jackie actually was at the origin of this strategy and innovation office. And Jackie and I, we were talking informally together, and she knew that I had been in enterprise risk management for a long time. So she was picking my brain on what are the added values, blah, blah, blah. And she said, well, you know what? I mean, this is what we need. So that's how it came. And
so it was like the vision of a key leader in the organization.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
So Rick, we have like 10 minutes or so. Was there more that you wanted to get through?
That's it. And it was just this one about, integrating WASA experience learnings into a risk register. And I think it's kind of an obvious one. I just kind of threw it out there, but it's every time you'd look at it, you'd consider anything that you learned along the way.
Yeah. And again, as we talked last week, and by the way, Rick, I really liked your presentation on your company, because I was not familiar with it. So thank you very much for that. There's no, on approaching it, there's not only one way of doing it. It really depends on your company. However, you need to have a certain buy-in. So if you want, as we talked about last week, to start, if you take your org chart for your lane, if you take all those different boxes of your org chart and start engaging them one by one and have regular risk workshops and the training first, or try to bring them this awareness. In the meantime, we are going to create the tools, namely the risk matrix and the threshold. And again, on this one, the risk matrix, well, actually the threshold, there may be several because your companies have some specificities or whatever that is. And we will discuss more in depth about that. But once you have your risk matrix and you have your risk register, even if for the time being it's an Excel spreadsheet, basically you're good to go, okay? Because it's really a matter of engaging your colleague. Really, that's here communication above all at the beginning, it's key. And I know we are using communication for everything, but it's a matter of relationship, meaning that go and see the people and say, have you thought about this risk in your lane and how this could impact you and how big do you see this risk? Is it a showstopper for what we want to achieve? And depending on the answers that you've got, and I come back to your strategic plan, because I'm working right now also on the strategic, well, no, we have a strategic plan at WSSC Water, right? We have the strategic priorities, and we have below what you call the action, the strategic initiatives, right? And a good portion of the strategic initiatives have been informed by the top risk of the company, okay? Which should be the case. Our colleagues in Portland did it in one shot. They had no risk management before, and they wanted to have a strategic plan informed by risk. So they went the full blown right away, right? Which is good. And yes, that's the final goal, to have risk and opportunities informing your strategic plan. So what do we do now in practice? Okay, we have our top 10 risks at WSSC Waters. And let's be clear, I mean, in the water industry, it's not like a kind of oil and gas project where you move from one project to another, you have the capital investment plan. So your risk, I would say, overall are going to be pretty stable across time, okay? All circumstances remaining constant, meaning not a pandemic, right? So you have your top risk. So what we do now is that we have created some small working groups, cross-functional working groups, to do exactly what you said, Rick, meaning to address more in detail the mitigation strategies, what you call the actions, okay? So some of the actions are very detailed and are really appealing to the operational layers and the experts over there that are going to yes, Scott?
Oh, no, well, I just, when you're finished with your point, just in closing, I wanted to talk, just address your last point there, which is, to Rick and Chris, who've been through the WASA process, and what's the relationship to that. And what I would say is that what it did is, if you extracted from that exercise, what are the principles and the questions, if you will, and the things that you measured related to risk, which says to what extent have you developed risk management and enterprise risk, to what extent have you documented it, to what extent have you applied it across your organization, to what extent is it effective, then that it could be a tie-in so that you're saying, and we've talked about these kind of practices or principles of risk, in these calls here, but you'll also see those in the benchmarking that you did. So you could basically, for people who have been through this, you could relate it back that way if you chose to. You don't have to, but there is a relationship. And when I think about how we want to document what does maturity look like, and what does assessment look like, that could help with our documentation of this. So I'll stop, but I think you know what I'm saying. So.
I think I think that what Rick brings up is something that has bugged me a little bit also, and that is, although there's some recognition that there are risks, it's sort of rare to find utilities who approach risk in a sort of structured and organized and standard way. And a number of utilities that I talk to say, oh yeah, that's the guy who takes care of insurance. And so I think that a question that Rick had, and I know we're coming very close to the end, that Rick had about the 5 whys also applies kind of here. Why is it, why doesn't it come naturally? Everybody has a maintenance department. Everybody's got a CIP and all that. But it's a little curious that it didn't evolve naturally a lot more, that it's not a little bit more common is what I would say.
Yeah, but I mean, we have also to be mindful that risk management is as a whole, is a pretty new job. I mean, 10 years ago, the ISO 31000 was the first time written, if I remember well, in 2008, but as a reaction to the financial crisis in the United States. So risk management kind of was born in a structured manner in reaction to a crisis, and was mainly for many years only focused for the financial industry. So it's pretty recent, let's say the last 5, 6, 7 years, that other industries have looked into it. So, I mean, yeah.
And you would probably agree, Elaine, that that what Rick and Metro Vancouver has done so far is a wonderful context, starting with a strategic plan and then driving it down. But what distinguishes emerging best practice would be the use of a methodology, and the methodology is what hasn't been understood and applied, and you have a real opportunity to do that.
No, absolutely. And again, the methodology is really simple. I mean, again, I'm saying it because that's true. I mean, it can become sophisticated. I mean, if we start talking about quantitative models and stuff, it can become sophisticated. But risk management is very simple. If you pull up your org chart, if you want to have a bottom-up approach, let's imagine, you engage with all the heads of your boxes in your org chart, right? And you train them, you provide them the risk matrix and the threshold, the risk register. You ask them to do a workshop every quarter or every month, depending on how the nature, and we can discuss on this. And then you have somebody in your team to kind of roll up, so maybe every quarter, all the risk that you see across your different box, and you would have already a first step towards risk management, towards enterprise risk management, I mean. So it may seem easy to say like this, but in practice, that's really how it happened. I made the matrix, I made the threshold, I suggested them, I said, do you agree? Yes, no, yes, good. I went and trained every single person, okay? And then using this training to make the first risk register and making some recurring meeting every quarter. So, I mean, that's very, very practical. Yes,
so since we only have like a minute or so to let people, they probably all have to run to another Zoom meeting. Would it be fair to say that an action item is perhaps, Elaine, for you to present this web-based risk thing that Rick was interested in? Would that be helpful, Rick, you think?
That would be interesting. I think we're a ways from being there, but it would be interesting just to see it. Just if there's something that we could model in a spreadsheet in a very simpler form.
Yeah.
Oh, the Excel spreadsheet version is the one that I have in the presentation that I showed you the other day. So
Yeah.
Okay.
But yes, sure, I will show it to you. And also what I would like us to do, and I know that you have a question, is that we work on the risk matrix and the threshold, because that will be your very first tool. So I would really like for next meeting that I can show you the risk dashboard and the web-based risk register, and we kind of focus on the risk matrix to start delivering. And we have one. So, I mean, again, that's an example on how you could do. You can tweak it. Each utility can tweak it. Okay. There are some guidelines, but you can tweak it within the guidelines. Yes, Chris, I'm sorry. You wanted to say something.
No. Thank you. Great presentation, Rick, and discussions for sure. I mean, I mean, it's great to hear that Helen can present the tool that you currently have, but also I'll be super interested in understanding how, we talked about the mitigation plans, like, CIP is sort of the one area of addressing some of the asset-related risks, but how other types of risks were designed to be mitigated.
Yep.
And it'll be nice to understand how WSSC is addressing these other non-asset type risks and how to sort of prioritize and balance against some of more tangible and technical mitigation actions.
Sure.
So that's my ask. I don't know if that's possible for.
Absolutely. And just for your information, Chris, and then I know you have to go, but on the top 10, 14 risk for WSSC water, only one is related to the assets. So meaning that all the other risks are non-asset related. Okay? So I'm happy to go in depth on how we do in the risk mitigation work group. So I think we have quite an agenda for next time, which is me showing the web-based risk register and the risk dashboard. So to give you an idea, start discussing in depth the risk matrix, so we can hopefully after a couple of sessions go out with how to make it, and you guys, you can tailor it for your own organization. And I will talk about how we do with the risk mitigation working groups. Sounds a plan?
Sounds great. So I'm going to stop.
Sounds great.